You're a brave man. Go and break through the lines. And remember, while you're out there risking life and limb through shot and shell, we'll be in here thinking what a sucker you are.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. I'm a writer, producer, and host over on the Outlaw Nation and a voiceover artist here in the world, and excited to be getting into this movie and a lover of old school comedy, and especially the Marx Brothers, my man.
There's something so special about the Marx Brothers that the level of wackiness is so high. Yeah. And it's funny. This is our second film from the 30s we've done recently, and I've made the same mistake both times. Last time was His Girl Friday, and I said, John, it's a short movie. It won't take me that long to prep. And then I'm watching it, and it's so fast-paced that I couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
And this was the same thing. The movie is 68 minutes, but there's literally constantly millions of things going on, and just Groucho's lines. It's just like, wait, what did he say? What happened? But the movie is Duck Soup. And John, do you remember how you first came to it?
Yeah, I watched it when I was a kid. I remember, as I've said before on the show multiple times, Metro Media 5 in DC used to show old movies growing up, or WDCA 20. It was one of those two. And I remember, because my parents worked so much, they're immigrants to this country, had to work a lot to kind of pay our bills. I was planted in front of a television for a majority of my younger years. And I remember watching this film, watching the Marx Brothers, and developing a very early love and devotion to the Marx Brothers, and being obsessed. I've read so many biographies on them, just incredible love I have for them. And so I remember watching it distinctly as a kid and just laughing so much, especially at the peanut scene and that mirror scene, or fake mirror scene, that once you see it at an impressionable age, that mirror scene never disappears for you in terms of its effect on you when you watch it.
I can't remember when I first saw the Marx Brothers. It's funny. My local TV station, they showed way more of Abbott and Costello and Shirley Temple and the Bowery Boys than they did the Marx Brothers. I don't know why. So I think it was probably junior high or high school. I think Duck Soup might have been my first one, but I'm not really sure. But I just remember falling in love, particularly with Groucho. And I think everybody's got, some people are Harpo people. I'm sure there's some Chico people. Yeah. Maybe some Zeppo people. I don't know. But
find the Gummo people? That's really going to be.
Find the Gummo people. But yeah, for me, and it's funny because I loved old radio shows, which is before there was audiobooks, which I listened to in podcasts. I would go to the library and get cassettes of old radio shows, and I listened to a ton of You Bet Your Life.
Right.
And Groucho is just so damn funny.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do a brief background on these people, but they're so damn interesting that it's going to be hard to keep it brief. But yes, the first thing is, in case you were wondering, they are in fact brothers.
Yes.
They performed from 1905 to 1949 together. They have there's the AFI Best Top 100 Comedies. They have 5 films in the AFI Top 100 Comedies.
That's insane.
Right? Yeah. They were born in New York City, children of Jewish immigrants. Mom was Minnie Schoenberg, known as Minnie Palmer, and she was always in the theater, always in the performing arts. She was from Germany. Dad was from France. He was Simon Marx, and his nickname was Frenchie, and he was a tailor. Grew up on the Upper East Side. Their first son, Manfred, died of tuberculosis at 7 months old in 1886. Leonard, who would become Chico, was born next in 87. Adolf, who would become Harpo, is born in 88. Julius, who is Groucho, born in 1990, followed by Gummo in 92. And Herbert, who became Zeppo, born in 1901. Their childhood, it sounds like growing up on the Upper East Side, was exciting. Chico did a lot of hustling. He started gambling, I think, at 5 years old. At one point, he gambled so much he lost his pants, snuck home with no pants, stole some money out of dad's pocket, went back out, gambled again, got his pants back, snuck the money back into dad's pocket, and got away with it. Harpo, musical talent. They're all talented musically, and Harpo seems like he was the most. Learned instruments, self-taught, and he taught himself how to play the harp. And what's funny, I don't know how he got access to a harp. That's not like an instrument that's generally lying around,
right.
But he didn't know how to tune it. So he just picked a note, put it on a string, and then tuned everything to that note, and then just figured out how to play it.
Wow.
A harp does not seem like an instrument that would be easy to play. And it wasn't until years later that he found out that he had tuned it entirely wrong.
Oh, wow.
So he had just invented this, and he would go to people at first and say, and he played it totally wrong. Like his hands were in the wrong places, fingering was wrong, everything was wrong.
Right.
And he would go to someone's like, well, can you teach me the right way? And they would watch him play and go, no, I don't want to mess with what you're doing. And finally, he was like a full adult when he finally found a teacher to teach him the correct method of playing the harp. Chico played. Sorry.
It's like the Beatles, right? I mean, neither John nor Paul can read music, and I was watching the recent McCartney one with Ruben that's on 321 on Hulu, and Ruben tried to get him to read a sheet. He's like, I don't do that. And when he collaborates with other people with these duets, McCartney's very clear from the beginning, I do not read music. I'm very much my own thing. And when Lennon later on, I think Lennon was asking him the same thing, like, hey, can you teach me? He was like, I don't want to mess with what you've created already. Why mess with something that totally works? So, that's understandable. Yeah. It's
so funny that you say the Beatles. I was going to bring this up much later, but there is a definite Beatles connection. They love the Marx Brothers, and you can see that's another influence in Hard Day's Night and their style. But the other thing, people have made this comparison, which I think is so interesting, which is that the formative years of the Marx Brothers is all this time doing vaudeville. And a lot of people said that's like Hamburg for the Beatles.
I could see that. Yeah.
Is that they were just forced to do it and do it and do it and do it and figure out who they were.
Right.
Groucho, believe it or not, it's also unshocking. So while Chico is hustling, Harpo is playing music, Groucho is a quiet intellectual who would get books and lock himself in the bathroom so he could just read. He was the only one who regularly went to school. The other ones just skipped out. They weren't there. But Mom was involved in vaudeville, and their uncle was a vaudeville performer, and Mom Minnie was managing them. And the first person that went to do vaudeville was Groucho in 1905. He joined a singing group, and they became the Three Nightingales with a woman, and Gummo joined in 1907. Then Harpo joined. It became the Four Nightingales. Then Minnie and their aunt joined. They changed the name to the Six Mascots. Chico's there. He wants to play piano, so he bribes the piano player in the pit so he could play piano. And this is maybe the very first bit of comedy for this singing group, is they saw Chico in the pit and they started throwing stuff at him. The big moment happens in 1912, which might have been in Nacogdoches, Texas, maybe, or some people say it was in Oklahoma and some people say it was somewhere else, but they're doing a show and doing their singing act, and we hear yelling about a runaway mule, and the audience all runs out of the theater to go see the runaway mule. And this pisses Groucho off. So then they come back in, he starts insulting the audience.
Yeah.
And he says things like, Nacogdoches is full of roaches. And Harpo, as the audience starts to react to this, Harpo starts hiding under the carpet. Chico jumps into the pit and starts playing the piano, and chaos ensues. And rather than getting angry, the audience ate it up. And so it became a musical act with a little bit of comedy. And then it became kind of half comedy, half musical. Zeppo joins in 1914. And right around then, they're actually all together for the only time ever. And then Gummo joins the army and to fight in World War I. And he wrote when they asked about it, he said, anything is better than being an actor. That's how Gummo felt about this stuff. And then it really became a full comedy act. They all got their names apparently at one poker game.
Yep. A guy was there who was part of betting and all that, and being part of the seedy underworld of performing and what have you. He named them all based on their characteristics. Absolutely. With Groucho, he was always a curmudgeon, so he called him Groucho. With Chico, he's always going after the girls, so he was called Chico. and Harpo the same thing because of his love for the harp, which is, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, something so unusual. For sure. I can't remember how Zeppo got his name. I forget what it was that Zeppo got it.
There's a lot of arguments about Gummo seems to be about that he wore shoes with rubber soles.
Right, gumshoes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, gumshoes.
Yes.
Zeppo, there's some like it was some product or sales or something, but there's some disagreement about how Zeppo became Zeppo.
Yeah.
Apparently, by the way, I read years ago, Harpo Speaks, his autobiography.
Yes. Good autobiography.
Really good. And I remember they're just stories about like people sitting down to play poker with the Marx Brothers and them just cheating and messing with people. And it just, the thing that I heard was that they were 10 times funnier on stage than they ever were in film.
Yes.
And they were 10 times funnier in person than they were on stage. Like they would destroy, like people would describe like literally falling out of their chairs in the aisles, couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
And a ton of it was when things started to go wrong, and they would improvise and they would mess with each other on the stage. And that's when some of the best, which of course you can't capture on film, that kind of stuff.
And I can't encourage people enough to read that Harpo spell. I have it in paperback down here somewhere with my other biographies. It's such a great biography. And yeah, it's fun, lighthearted stories for the most part. But there's also a very emotional, incredibly unsettling story he tells about being one of the first American performers in Russia during the time when American performers did not perform in Russia, and what he saw there, a line of shops of yellow stars out in front, and said walking in and seeing these people who were just half alive, shell-shocked, wondering when the next punch or beating was going to come, figuratively or literally, because they just didn't understand the change. All of a sudden, they were unwanted people as Jewish people, and related, obviously connected to that being Jewish himself, and how he almost was captured and imprisoned by the Russian authorities when he was because he was leaving. And he was a guy who was an American who was staying there as well, told him, hey, they're switching over to rubles, paying rubles. Trust me, you're going to get out of here. Use the rubles. So he goes to pay in rubles instead of his foreign money, and it raises suspicions. So these Russian soldiers grab him, they throw him into a room, and they start interrogating him about like, where'd you get the rubles? Where'd you get the rubles? And he's just like, he didn't out his friend for giving him the rubles. He just said he had it and he was paying for it. And then they started to go through his stuff, and he said, there's nothing in here. You're not gonna. And they found the harp, and he said, yeah, I play harp. That's what I'm harp. I'm a performer. And they said, well, play it. But his hands were so frozen from the Russian cold that he couldn't play the harp believably or well enough. And another soldier who was there played it equally as good as Harpo's. So they were like, how could you be a performer if you're just as good as one of these soldiers? And then they went through the rest of his stuff, and they found like dynamite sticks and all this stuff that he uses for his show. And they thought he was going in there as like a spy to do stuff or blow stuff up. But that American who gave him rubles eventually heard what was happening and went there and negotiated for Harpo's release, and he got on the train and they left. But that's how close he came to being like stuck in that country during such a tumultuous time as a Jewish performer, an American Jewish performer in Russia. So crazy.
What so crazy story.
Yeah.
They're one of the biggest acts in vaudeville, and Chico decides, let's go to Broadway. And the rest of the brothers are freaked out. This is a big, scary thing to do. And they ended up being a huge hit. Their first play is Coconuts. The next is Animal Crackers. They had brilliant writers like George S. Kaufman writing for them. And what happens is, this is in the mid-20s.
Yeah.
And right as they're destroying on Broadway, the Jazz Singer happens. And suddenly Hollywood is looking for people that can talk.
Yeah.
And so they look to the Marx Brothers, and it's a good thing, because the other thing that happened right then is the stock market crashed in 29.
Right.
Groucho lost everything.
Yep.
He had put together $250,000. It was all in the market. And then when it went down halfway, he doubled down. He went, well, it's got to be at the bottom. And then everything gone. Harpo lost almost everything. Chico apparently never had any money
because he was gambling all the time.
He's just gambling all the time.
Right.
So he was okay. And the other thing that happened right before they went to Hollywood is their mom died.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is this is 25 years in vaudeville before they make their first movie.
Yeah.
They're all in their 40s at this point.
Right.
First movie's Coconuts in 29, Animal Crackers in 30, Horse Feathers in 32 was the highest grossing movie of 1932.
I love Horse Feathers. Yeah.
It's great. But that was what's so funny is there's so many bits. I mean, what's weird about these movies is there a story? Sure.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, sure.
But
there's a plot. Yes.
But who cares? I mean, even trying to put any thought into what is actually going on doesn't really, it's not worth your time because it's just watching the Marx Brothers.
And they're brilliant skewers of institutional stuff, right? In Horse Feathers, it's all about skewing the idea. And Groucho would know, being, as you said, Steve, an intellectual. Someone who went to school, they're skewering the university system. They're skewering sports. They're skewering this idea of these institutions in America. This is what they loved to do. They were so known for being these upstarts, these rebellious guys. Even on stage, you never knew what you were going to get from one show to the next. They were rebellious in numerous ways. And so it made sense that everything they did was always them being these kind of upstarts going into these like stuffy places and overturning everything and making fun of it and turning it upside down.
So after Horse Feathers was such a huge hit, they're getting ready for the production on their next film, which is going to be titled Firecrackers. And slated to direct is Ernst Lubitsch.
Of all people, yes.
And here was the even crazier one, is supervising the production is Herman Mankiewicz.
Oh, wow.
So it was going to be an Ernst Lubitsch, Herman Mankiewicz production of a Marx Brothers film.
There's no way that would have gone off. There's no effing way that would have gone off. No way.
The problem is Paramount, despite the fact that Horse Feathers was a huge hit, is right on the edge of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And the Marx Brothers are worried that they're not even going to get paid.
Yeah.
And that at that point that Lubitsch leaves, Mankiewicz leaves, the movie gets changed title to Cracked Ice. There's so many writers that come in and out they don't even know how to give credit for really who wrote this. It's all sorts of different people. And the way that they prepped, which I love, is that a bit would be written for them and then they would go play it live and they would experiment with it, and perfect it. And then, and maybe it would end up in the movie, or if they didn't feel it was good enough, then it would get tossed. And the thing about no two shows were ever the same with the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, they never were. Yeah.
And they're going to start shooting on February 15th, 1933. Titles changed to Grasshoppers, and then it get pushed, and then it got pushed again. And then in May, their father, Frenchie, died. And finally, Paramount and the Marx Brothers kind of settled their dispute, and they feel more comfortable that they're going to make the movie, and they bring on Leo McCarey to direct. And he was really the best director they'd worked with up to that point. He was a silent movie guy, Hal Roach guy, did tons of Laurel and Hardy.
Right.
He didn't want to work with the Marx Brothers.
Wow.
The film was shot between June and mid-July in 1933. McCarey came up with the title of Duck Soup.
Okay.
Part of it was all of their movies, they have these animal names in movies.
Right.
Duck Soup apparently is an expression, slang for something easy to do. Oh, it's duck soup.
Yeah.
It's not an expression that I was really familiar with.
Neither was I.
They asked Groucho, why is it called duck soup? He said, take 2 turkeys, 1 goose, 4 cabbages, but no ducks, and mix them together. And after one taste, you'll duck soup for the rest of your life.
Perfect answer.
I'm so fascinated by Groucho language because it's all non sequitur and absurd and it's amazing.
This is where people need to understand, the comedy is brilliant because that's not easy to do.
No.
And too many people think slapstick comedy or punny comedy is so easy. It really isn't. And if you get lost in the slapstick, which isn't that much in the Marx Brothers, rather, you will miss the brilliant comedy that's going on. The timing, the what they're saying about things, and just the overall funniness of what they're skewering. It's brilliant. But if you get lost in the whole physical comedy stuff, you're going to miss some of the great comedy that it really is what separates them from so many other contemporary comedians at the time.
What's crazy about it is it's so precise.
Yeah.
It's so well timed out, as you say, and yet it all seems totally natural.
Yes.
It just seems like it's happening, like there isn't like if you watch Charlie Chaplin, also obviously so precise.
Oh yeah.
But it's clear, like it's a dance. It's all been worked out, every detail, and it feels that way.
Right.
Whereas this feels like they're just making this up, which some of the time they are.
Yeah.
Shall we get into the film?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we start with a big sign that says NRA at the beginning, which is not the National Rifle Association. It is the National Recovery Act because we're in the middle of the Depression. In our titles, we see some live ducks in a pot of hot water with a fire under it. No ducks were harmed. And this is the only appearance of ducks in Duck Soup at all. And then we see a flag. It's the flag of Fredonia. We wipe to a castle, and there are these people in elegant clothes. And this is the setup. The setup is there's this country. It's going bankrupt. The great Margaret Dumont, who is the straight woman for many of the movies. Yeah. She is Mrs. Teasdale. She has apparently loaned the government of Fredonia half of her husband's fortune, and she refuses to give them any more money unless they get someone responsible in charge of the country, and that person is Rufus T. Firefly.
Rufus T. Firefly.
I will lend the money to Fredonia only if Firefly is appointed leader.
A more irresponsible name we've never heard, I believe.
And of course, we cut to a newspaper with a picture of Groucho saying he's now the head of this country.
What an introduction. What an introduction. You haven't even seen him yet. It's just in a newspaper. It's brilliant.
What's interesting about the Marx Brothers is we already know their characters.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? We don't have to, you just see a picture of Groucho, you know it's Groucho.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this reception is crazy.
It's not, but of course, it's meant to skewer this idea of these kinds of, like we see now with North Korea and other countries, we do it, right?
Sure.
All our playing the national anthem before the sports games, bring the troops out, bring the massive American flag out, have the jets fly over. This is what they're skewering, the pomp and circumstance of kissing your own country's ass. And I think this is what they're showing here with the Fredonia entrance and everything like that. Of course, we get introduced to all the characters that were part of Sylvania's. So I love that. I wonder if that was a company at the time. But Sylvania's leader, we get introduced to these number of people here. But like amidst all this pomp and circumstance where they announce everybody who's walking through the door with these two loud trumpets and what have you. But yeah, it's all of that to lead to Groucho getting the alarm or Rufus getting the alarm in bed. Yeah.
By the way, the guy who plays Trentino, the ambassador of Sylvania, his name is Louis Calhern. He was a buddy of Harpo's. He's a Broadway actor. They hung out together all the time. This guy was acting in movies in the silent era and continued to act all the way through the 50s.
Wow.
Huge, long career. Right. And we also meet a dancer with him. This is Raquel Torres. And one of the interesting things about this movie is, I know it's come up a few times on the Cine-Files, is there's something called the Hays Code. And the Hays Code was the very first sort of ratings system that meant you couldn't do scandalous and terrible things. Mm-hmm. This movie is 1 year before the Hays Code.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And there are a lot of things, including her low-cut dress, which would probably have never been able to be on screen the next year.
Yeah, and she is a Mexican actress, acted for a little bit until about 1935, then married a businessman and lived with him for a while. Then he passed away and she moved and married someone else and died. She was 78 years old, but she never came back. There had been possibilities because the husband she married, a businessman who became a producer of B movies, but she never went back to do films after 1935. Wow. I think she's very sweet in this movie. And it's rare to find, a Latina actress or a Hispanic actress in these 1930s, 1940s films. Yeah. And she's not played, her heritage is not played for any jokes. None of it. It's all, there's the male female dynamic certainly explored, but she's played as someone who is kind of just dedicated to Sylvania in her own way. She's not played evil or mean or anything like that. Yeah.
And one of the things we hear is that Trentino, the ambassador from Sylvania, he wants to take over the country of Fredonia.
Yeah.
And one of his schemes is to marry Mrs. Teasdale. Mm-hmm. But she apparently is sweet on Rufus T. Firefly.
Yes.
And then we meet Zeppo, who is Firefly's secretary.
His Excellency makes it a point always to be on time. As long as I've known him, he's never been late for an appointment.
This is his last film with the Marx Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. There's a lot of like, is Zeppo good in this movie? No,
Zeppo was never good. No offense to Zeppo, but
that's what I think too.
Yeah, I think Zeppo and Gummo, the reason Gummo didn't like is Gummo was like not the level. I mean, imagine that, Steve, that you had to step up and be at the level of Harpo, Chico, and Groucho. That's a lot to ask. And to think the talent could run through multiple brothers is really kind of a rare thing. Ask the Baldwins. Trust me, it's the law of diminishing returns.
There's
when
a
you go
hierarchy
down.
here.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at the situation here, it's the same thing. It's like, and I think Zeppo did what he could do and then was out. Like, I'm sure he felt like, this isn't for me. I'm not at that level. I don't want to do this stuff. There's other things. I'm being overshadowed. So let me go and do other things with my life. So it's understandable. And he's still in the most iconic and lauded Marx Brothers movies. So at least he went out with a bang.
And he's a okay straight man.
Sure. He's okay.
You know,
sure.
It's funny. I read it multiple times. I don't really believe it, but I read multiple times people saying that offstage Zeppo was the funniest.
Oh, really? Wow.
I mean, I can't see it.
Maybe he had to be like the subtle humor because everyone else is so big. He was smarter with his zingers, so therefore it was funnier. Maybe that's possible.
And now, in preparation for the arrival of Firefly, we get into a big song.
Yes,
which Zeppo starts.
No sense out of nowhere, Steve.
It's crazy. And we just see all of this pomp and circumstances, including the trumpet guys, and then the soldiers come in and they get out their swords and they make that thing to make like an archway, which I was trying, I'm taking my notes, I'm going, there's got to be a name for that where people do that. And I looked it up. It is called a saber arch.
Oh, okay.
Little tidbits of information you didn't think you were going to get on the Cine-Files.
But once again, this song is what? Once again, this whole pomp and circumstance, celebrating, once again, I'll connect it to North Korea, how they make up songs to celebrate their leaders. Same thing here, right? It's a song to celebrate Rufus T. Firefly, who's going to show up at 10 a.m.
And then he's not there. And they pause. And then they reset. And they sing Hail Fredonia again. And everyone bows again. No Rufus T. Firefly. Cut to an alarm going off. He's in bed. And this is like old silent movie trick where we sped up the film. He jumps up, takes off his pajamas, slides down a pole, walks through the reception hall. No one notices him. I love the Groucho walk, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And goes up to one of the soldiers and whispers,
You expecting somebody?
Yes.
and so he just joins them and puts his arm up in the saber arch. And as they do another Hail Fredonia, and finally Mrs. Treesdale, Margaret Dumont, sees him.
So good. So good, man.
As chairwoman of the reception committee, I extend the good wishes of every man, woman, and child of Fredonia.
Never mind that stuff. Take a card.
Card? What'll I do with the card?
You can keep it. I've got 51 left.
I think one of the interesting things about this movie is that everyone else in it has to be completely straight.
Yeah.
And not recognize the insanity of the things that are going on around them.
Yeah.
And Margaret Dumont is the best.
Her and Louis Calhern are fantastic in the movie, playing the straight. I mean, we're going to get to that sequence where he first meets Chico and Harpo as his spies. And the crap they put him through, just insane.
Yeah.
And whereas the guy who runs I forget the guy's name, who runs the lemonade stand, he's a well-known Max Sennett guy at the time, so it kind of flows. But this, Louis has to play it as, very straight, and Margaret has to play it very straight. And, she loved him. She loved Groucho. She loved doing all the stuff she did for Groucho. She performed with him 7 days before she died of a heart attack. 7 days. They were reunited on February 28th, and then she died on March 6th. So it's like, or 6 days, I guess. She died after they were reunited. I think it was for the Colgate Comedy Hour. So it's just like she had such devotion to him. And if you can find that, it's really great to see them reunited. There's such chemistry and love for each other that it's there.
And there was always this sort of rumor that Margaret Dumont, not just her characters, but that she didn't get it. She didn't understand the humor.
No.
That is not true.
Of course, that's not true.
And in fact, one of the things she had to do was she had to, her pauses are specifically timed to make room for the laugh before the next joke. If she comes in too quick, then the laughter will roll over the next line.
Yes.
Which is a thing. I mean, you've been on stage. There's a timing when you have a live audience that you can feel the laugh start to subside.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can come in. But you don't have that timing when you're making a movie. It's all silent. So
right.
I can't possibly say all of the lines that Groucho has that are amazing. And why would you want to listen to me do them? But we will get some of them. And this is the first big ramble. Yeah. She says, I feel you are the most able statesman in all Fredonia. And he says,
well, that covers a lot of ground. Say, you cover a lot of ground yourself. You better beat it. I hear they're going to tear you down and put up an office building where you're standing. You can leave in a taxi. If you can't get a taxi, you can leave in a huff. If that's too soon, you can leave in a minute and a half. You know, you haven't stopped talking since I came here. You must have been vaccinated with a phonograph needle.
A vaccination joke.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. Brilliant. You know where I got Groucho rhythms probably the most first is Alan Alda, Hawkeye in MASH.
Right. He would do the imitations.
He would do Groucho stuff.
I will not carry a gun, Frank. I'll carry your books. I'll carry a torch. I'll carry a tune. I'll carry on, carry over, carry forward, carry Grant, cash and carry me back to old Virginia. I'll even Harry carry if you show me how, but I will not carry a gun.
Yeah, totally.
And this is one of the things, they're so influential on so many comedians going forward. Yeah. One of the things that people said was that this is the very beginning of talking pictures. Some people have said that Groucho is the person who brought wit to films.
Right.
You can't be witty in a silent movie. You can be funny.
Right.
But the wordplay, this is the beginning of it.
Promise me you'll follow in the footsteps of my husband.
How do you like that? I haven't been on the job 5 minutes and already she's making advances to me.
And he's talking to the camera, breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Here are the two things the studio, when they came to Hollywood, didn't want. They said to Groucho, you cannot break the fourth wall and you can't do that fake, grease paint mustache. That's not going to cut it in the movies. Groucho won both fights.
And the way he did the grease paint mustache is he was late for a show. And he couldn't tape on the whiskers in time. So he just did the grease paint and then eventually did the eyebrows. But the grease paint was all done on just a spur of the moment because he was late for a show. So, it's just these things that had these happy accidents that really good performers can use to advance their career. It's really fascinating to look at, Well, I would argue Groucho, and to me, it's Groucho and the Tramp. Always. Yeah. It's always that battle in my head about who was actually the best.
The iconic.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about that comparison is that both of them are created characters.
Yeah.
Like there is a Groucho character that is it's a silhouette. You see the cigar and the glasses and the mustache, it's like, which is the same as the Tramp.
Yes.
That's a really good comparison.
Yeah.
Not that I care, but where is your husband?
Why, he's dead.
I'll bet he's just using that as an excuse.
I was with him till the very end.
No wonder he passed away.
I held him in my arms and kissed him.
Oh, I see. Then it was murder.
And I love, this is a classic Groucho.
Will you marry me? Did he leave you any money? Answer the second question first.
Your point about the grease paint is really important because one of the things about the Marx Brothers, none of this is real. Like,
yes,
we're not supposed to think that this is reality.
Right.
This is being silly.
Yeah.
Haven't we seen each other somewhere before?
I don't think so. I'm not sure I'm seeing you now. It must be something I ate.
Look here, sir. Are you trying to...
Don't look now, but there's one man too many in this room, and I think it's you.
We get introduced to the ambassador, and then we get introduced to the dancer.
This is Vera Markel, the famous dancer.
Is that so? Can you do this one?
And the Groucho dance moves. I know this is a podcast and you can't see them, but
pretty limber for 40 though. I'll say that.
And it's so silly.
Yeah.
And she says, perhaps we could get a chance to dance together.
I could dance with you till the cows come home.
Yeah.
On second thought, I'd rather dance with the cows till you come home.
You know what? You're going to have to watch the movie. It's like there's so many jokes. I want to say them all. I'm gonna move ahead because then what happens after some jokes about dentists and checks and things like that is that Mark Dumont brings us into another song.
Yes.
And this is Groucho talking about laying down the law.
If any man should come between a husband and his bride, we find out which one she prefers by letting her decide. If she prefers the other man, the husband steps outside. We stand him up against the wall and pop goes the weasel.
Apparently the songs are mostly written by the screenwriters with a lot of improvisation and changes from the Marx Brothers. This is, you talked about what they're skewering.
Yeah.
Now we're skewering dictatorships.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And what are they? Jewish. And what are they aware of, right? At the time, like this has always been the plight of Jewish people in the history of the world, right? This is vilifying, pointing the finger at, and using them first as the scapegoat to rally the people. And so they would be very well schooled in this particular point of view. So having that happen, and also they're skewering the idea that, the new guy's better. He's not going to be a dictator like the old guy. Oh, wait, he's a dictator. Just he's against different things than you are, but he's still a dictator in a different pair of pants, rather. Yeah.
Well, and it's skewering the idea that there's this person that's going to come along.
Yes.
And they're just so amazing. They're going to solve all of our problems. And they are, in fact, just as human and flawed and ridiculous as all other people.
Yes, exactly.
The thing you said that I think is really interesting, I hadn't thought about it this way, is I think, man, there must have been, you have all these Jewish immigrants coming from Europe where they didn't really have a voice.
Yeah.
And there must have just been this explosion of expression when they come to this country.
Oh, yeah.
And they can suddenly speak.
Yep.
And it's just as you say, that's just the skewering of authority.
And make money for speaking, make money for being funny, make money for singing, make money for as opposed to being silenced. You know, they were able to be appreciated, lauded, elevated for that. And yeah, it's a good thing.
And we hear that it's time to go to the House of Representatives. And so we call for His Excellency's car. And after a lot of pomp and circumstance, he ends up outside. By the way, this was shot at a house in Pasadena.
Oh.
And up comes Harper on the motorcycle with a sidecar.
Yeah.
I'm in a hurry. To the House of Representatives. Ride like fury. If you run out of gas, get Ethel. If Ethel runs out, get Mabel. Now step on her.
And he steps on it and drives off without Groucho. This is the first of a running gag. Let's go to Sylvania. And the first thing we hear is there's a guy whose job was to start a revolution, and he has failed.
Yeah.
This is the bartender from Casablanca.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And we hear that the ambassador has hired a couple of spies and they're going to disgrace and discredit Firefly. And we hear that they're here, and we open the door and there is Chico and Harpo, Chico in a mask, Harpo in a backwards mask. This scene, you mentioned it before. This is a scene that's really hard to talk about on a podcast.
Well, if you're going to go step by step, yes, I think so too. But he is this guy who's hired these two to be spies. They're the most incompetent spies you'll ever come in contact with. And all they do is spend this whole scene totally showing you how little respect they have for his position, his status, and him as their employer. Harpo is cutting his tails. They're putting paste on his butt, so he sits down, the newspaper sticks to it. They leave with Harpo putting his hand in a mousetrap. So it's essentially, once again, skewering a government official that uses other people for to become spies or tell on other people or what have you. So it's very funny the way it's done. And yes, on its base level, very funny just for the slapstick humor or the physical comedy, but also underneath is the skewering of political officials.
Well, and I think what's interesting, there's all sorts of sort of political satire where you're skewering the ideas of politics that's not what this is.
No.
This is, it's like the Marx Brothers are just pure chaos. Mm-hmm. You've let insanity into your world and you have no control over where it's going to go or what it's going to do. Yeah. Like there's a moment where like they do a baseball moment where Harpo runs and then slides back.
Get out!
He pulls out a blowtorch to light the cigars. There's, the ambassador goes to sit down. They both sit down under him. And I don't know how you're an actor and play this straight,
Mm-hmm. That's why you cast your friend, though, isn't it? Because he's probably, seen these shows and seen other people do straight men for them on Broadway or on stage. And so he knows how to play this really well and has a comfort level. I'm sure if there were outtakes back then, I'm sure there are a crap ton from this scene. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I found out that one of my teachers was the assistant editor on this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, because Eddie Dimitrich, the Hollywood director, I took classes from him when he was 96 years old.
Right.
At USC. And he was the assistant, went on to direct Mutiny on the Bounty and a whole bunch of movies in the 50s and 60s, and was one of the Hollywood 10. He was the assistant editor on this movie.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's nuts. We're with the House of Representatives or whatever it is, and Groucho is playing Jax, and here's the thought that I had as I'm watching him, because he's like playing Jax, and there's so much he does with his face and so much sort of silliness, like just him fluttering his eyes or little looks. Another person who I think must have loved Groucho is Chevy Chase.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
like if you watch Fletch, all those little things that he does. And it's funny, like Chevy Chase at his peak, he was one of those people who was just, I don't even know what he was doing. He was just funny.
Yeah.
And Groucho is that way. He's just, everything he does is just funny.
Here's the Treasury Department's report. I hope you'll find it clear.
Clear? Why, a 4-year-old child could understand this report. Run out and find me a 4-year-old child. I can't make head or tail out of it.
And then a guy gets up. He says, let's take up old business.
I wish to discuss the tariff.
Sit down. That's new business. No old business? Very well. Then we'll take up new business.
Now about that tariff.
Too late. That's old business already.
And yes, there's a plot. There's people that are going on strike. We're worried about war. We got to raise the taxes. We don't have any money. It doesn't matter.
No, exactly. But once again, I mean, and I think this is, as much as Rufus T. Firefly is essentially the protagonist of the movie, he's also someone that is being skewered by himself, because his indifference to the plight of the people that he's in charge of or leading is also how some people view leaders, that they don't care. They don't care about. They just see us all as numbers. They don't care.
Part of it is like you mentioned, like the Tramp or Buster Keaton.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys are heroes.
Yes.
They might have flaws, particularly the Tramp certainly has some flaws in his character, but he's the hero of the story.
Right.
The Marx Brothers are not good guys.
No, you're enjoying them. You're not necessarily maybe cheering for them, but you're certainly enjoying them. Yes.
I mean, they're horrible people.
Yes, exactly.
They have no respect for anything or anyone, and they just want to tear everything down. They are anarchy unleashed.
Anarchy. Yes.
Agreed. Speaking of which, we've reached the peanut scene. I think this might be the best. I think this might be my favorite sequence in the movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I mean, it's so hard to tell, but it's just so damn silly.
Yeah.
The setup is Chico has a peanut roasting cart and Harpo is there. And next to them is a guy with a lemonade park. That guy, by the way, is Edgar Kennedy. And he was a real, like, I think you said, he's a Hal Roach guy.
Yep.
This
Hal
guy
Roach,
done a
not
lot.
Max Sennett, Hal Roach, my bad. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Done a lot of two-reelers, a lot of comedies, and did Laurel and Hardy movies. Like, this guy really been around.
Yeah.
And there's so many just little gags.
Oh yeah, I mean the gag with the hats, the exchanging of the hats amongst the three of them is so very funny. The idea that he's like, why are you guys fighting in front of my business? You drive away my customers. The holding of the leg thing, switching, Chico kicking him in the butt the whole time, like those little things like that just utterly frustrate him. That ends up leading with his beloved hat being set on fire in the Peanuts stand. So very, very funny. And the frustration, those little comments, just so great, because he always attempts to try to throw a punch or thinks, to flinch, but he never does. He's just constantly being taken advantage of and frustrated the whole time.
Let's talk first about the holding the leg thing, because this is a classic Harpo gag.
Yes,
it's totally bizarre, which is someone's talking to him and he just puts his leg in their hand. and there's always a pause between when the leg goes in the hand and when the person notices the leg in the hand, and then they throw the leg away, And of course, Harpo speaks with these horns, which he's frequently like leaning in and honking.
Hey, listen, what are you doing around here?
By the way, one of the things that happened, Harpo did talk early on in the Marx Brothers career, and he was sort of talking less and less. And then apparently there was a bad review that said, when Harpo talks, it's terrible. And that was it. He never spoke again.
Wow.
There's a moment where he makes this really, really bizarre face that only Harpo can make. That is called a gookie. And gookie is something that Harpo, when he was a kid, saw some guy in a store window rolling cigars. And as he rolled the cigars, he made this face. And that just became a Harpo signature thing.
Oh, that makes sense.
By the way, so we watched this with Karen and with Jax. And Jax has loved every old black and white comedy. We did the Charlie Chaplin, we did Modern Times, loved it. Right. Not only did he love The General, he wanted to watch it again with Buster Keaton. Loved it. He burst out laughing so many times with Harpo. He thinks Harpo is the funniest person in the world.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that it totally still works.
Yes. Yes.
The stuff that Harpo is doing, like I love you're talking about the hats. Like I love the moment where Chico puts the guy's hat on top of his hat and the guy takes it and then Harpo steals his hat off. So now he's wearing Chico's hat.
Right.
Or he tries to put his hat on and Harpo, just as he puts it on, steals that hat and puts the other hat on his head. Like all those little things. And they're just so smooth and effortless the way they do them.
Yeah.
So this is something, it actually comes from Leo McCarey, the director had this idea, which he had done with Laurel and Hardy, which he called escalating destruction. Each one is trying to destroy something with the other one as we move along. Groucho is on the balcony. Chico is down below selling his peanuts. And Groucho yells down, "You want a job as a public nuisance?"
Sure, how much does the job pay?
I've got a good mind to join the club and beat you over the head with it.
Peanuts!
Chico comes inside. He's answering Groucho's phone.
Hello? No, he's not in. All right, I tell him. Goodbye. That was for you.
I'm sorry I'm not in. I wanted to have a long talk with you.
Chico and Groucho together are great.
Oh my God. Just so good. I think they were the closest in terms of a talent on the things they were doing, the verbal comedy, right? Whereas Harpo, great, no one touched him on the silent stuff, but him and Groucho, oh my God! And I think they were, I think he was the youngest, second, right behind Groucho, if I'm not wrong on that.
No, Chico's the oldest.
Oh, Chico's the oldest.
Chico, Harpo, Groucho.
Yeah, so Groucho doesn't intimidate him at all. So yeah, it's perfect.
Well, what I actually think it is, I think he's the swingman because he can go do physical stuff with Harpo.
Good point.
And he can do the word stuff with Groucho.
Yeah.
Now, what is it that has 4 pair of pants, lives in Philadelphia, and it never rains but it pours?
That's a good one. I give you 3 guesses.
Now, let me see. Has 4 pair of pants, lives in Philadelphia. Is it male or female?
No, I don't think so.
Is he dead?
Who?
I don't know. I give up.
I give up, too.
And he's offering him the job of being the Secretary of War. Because naturally, that makes perfect sense.
Why not?
Just for that, you don't get the job I was going to give you.
What job?
Secretary of War.
All right, I take it.
So.
And then the last time the phone rings, Harpo runs in and they all dive across to get the phone. And now Harpo has a conversation on the phone using only his horns. And he is so expressive.
Yeah.
There's a questioning horn sound. There's a laughing horn sound.
It's so good. It's so good.
And then it's Harpo and Groucho. And he's asking Harpo's question, ask who he is. And he has a tattoo of himself.
Yes.
And then he says, that's too modern. You got one of the old masters? And Harpo reveals a bikini tattoo. And then Groucho asks where he lives. And he lifts up his shirt and there is a house.
Yes.
And Groucho leans in, and in the weirdest visual effect of all time, a dog leaps out of the house in Harpo's stomach and barks at Groucho.
I loved it. Loved that moment.
And then he leaves, and then in one of the great cutting things up moments, Zeppo walks in with his straw hat cut in half.
Yes.
And Zeppo says we got a letter from the ambassador that he's trying to undermine you. And basically we come up with this plan is we could have some insults. Then maybe the ambassador will slap you. And then that will solve their conflicts with this country. I don't quite understand how getting slapped by the ambassador is going to help anything. But of course it doesn't matter.
Right.
And we hear that the ambassador is at Mrs. Teasdale's tea party.
Was I invited?
No.
Take a letter. You are cordially invited to attend my tea party. Sign Mrs. Teasdale's name and tell her I accept. Come on, let's go.
Let's have another Harpo gag. He drives up. Groucho says, step on it. I've got an appointment to insult Tarantino. Not Tarantino.
Whoa.
We're at the tea party. And again, this is in Pasadena. This is at the Arden Villa in Pasadena, which still exists, this big, huge house. We start with the ambassador and the dancer, and he's complaining he's still not making any progress with Mrs. Teasdale. But we're cool because we know Firefly is not going to show up because our dancer was in charge of the invitation. So he didn't get an invitation. Cut to
His Excellency, Rufus T. Firefly.
I love that he walks in, grabs a donut off of one table and dunks it into some coffee on another.
Well, he's the leader. He can do what he wants.
Firefly interrupts Trentino, who is proposing, calls him a baboon.
What? I'm sorry I said that. It isn't fair to the rest of the baboons.
And then Trentino starts insulting Rufus. He calls him a swine, a worm, an upstart. Rufus slaps his face, and this is going to bring the countries to war.
Yeah.
Again, another sidecar joke.
No, you don't. I'm not taking any more chances. You can only fool a firefly twice. This time you ride in the sidecar.
Harpo switches the sidecar. Groucho gets on the motorcycle. The sidecar takes off.
I think my favorite part of this, and it's a gag that's coming. And Steve, the comedy of threes. We know it. It's the third gag. He stays in that leaning position the whole time.
Yes, that's the key.
As if it's somehow just going to miraculously take off. He stays in that position. And it's what sells the joke.
Back to the peanut stand. And our lemonade guy is back. Now he's got a straw hat. They go at each other right away. Lemonade guy wipes like mustard on Harpo's hand. Harpo wipes that on the lemonade guy's sash, then cuts it off. They're knocking peanuts out of each other's hands. He takes the hat, puts it into the roaster, lights that hat on fire, to which our lemonade guy tosses the whole cart. He goes back to his lemonade stand that's very busy. Harpo rolls up his pants, jumps up on the lemonade stand, gets into the lemonade, and starts running with his bare legs. That pretty much kills the business.
I know. And there was a whole line of people. Apparently, people came from miles around to have this lemonade, Steve.
Delightful lemonade. I mean, who doesn't like a delicious glass of nice cold lemonade? Again, Margaret Dumont is trying to avoid war. I mean, this is very serious.
She's desperate to do so, yes.
You think she would have rethought this whole Rufus T. Firefly thing at some point.
At this point, yeah, right.
And she set up a meeting where she's going to have Firefly come back to the ambassador and they're going to work it out. So she calls up Groucho, who's in bed covered in crackers. Not animal crackers.
Right.
And she says, you have to come over.
It's a long story. I can't tell it to you over the phone.
Oh, it's that kind of a story. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'll be right over.
And he gives her the plans for war.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But she now has the plans for war.
Why don't you marry me?
Why, marry you?
You take me and I'll take a vacation. I'll need a vacation if we're going to get married. Married. I can see you right now in the kitchen, bending over a hot stove. But I can't see the stove.
And then in comes the ambassador. So we're going to resolve all of this.
I am willing to do anything to prevent this war.
It's too late. I've already paid a month's rent in the battlefield.
Let me preface this joke.
Sure.
So there are moments in this film which have some references to things that maybe wouldn't make you that comfortable today.
Yeah, it's true.
And one of them is this joke that ends up talking about this term that I will say, which is darkies.
Yeah.
It's a really weird one because like this is the era that this was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Marx Brothers would have thought that they were being racist or offensive, but this is what that joke is. And there are a couple of them in the film.
It is. You're right there because essentially this is a Jimmy the Greek moment back in the 1930s. If you guys remember Jimmy the Greek and what he got caught saying in the 1980s on camera,
right,
and which got him fired. And it was a popular racist belief that has been going on for numerous decades about African Americans, about blacks in this country. And so, yeah, you're right. It's a joke to point out as not a good joke and one that shouldn't be lauded as we watch this movie.
And then what happens is we're trying to remember what were the insulting things that the ambassador said to Firefly that got him so upset. And we repeat them, worm, swine, and then we get to upstart and he slaps him again.
That's the one.
Yeah. And now Vera, the dancer, her job is now to get the war plans because he knows that Treesdale has them. There's this weird thing, by the way. She's talking to Trentino on the phone and she's holding her dress in this weird way. Vera, the dancer, is. And I go like, what is going on with her side? Is the dress like falling apart? Is there a hole there? Is her side hurt? It's very strange the way she's holding her dress.
Yeah.
And now Harpo and Chico show up to sneak into this house.
Ring the bell.
But of course, Harpo has a giant bell. A guy comes out and Harpo sneaks in and closes the door behind him and Chico is left out. And then Chico goes in and Harpo is left out and then they're both left out. And, you know, it's a bit. And then they go into another room because the dancer lets them in.
Oh, for heaven's sake, whatever you do, don't make a sound. If If you're found, you're lost.
Oh, you're crazy. How can I be lost if I'm found?
And then she says, whatever you do, don't make a sound. And as she says this, Harpo is playing with a clock, which rings. He picks up a duck, which is a music box. It starts playing. He opens up a piano, which he plays like a harp. This is the only thing that's even remotely of Harpo playing music.
Yeah. It's one of those rare Marx Brothers films where he doesn't.
This was a complaint. Like, they're like, why do we not have a harp scene?
You stay here, but keep quiet. Remember what she said. If we get caught, we're going to get court plastered.
Instead of court-martialed.
Right.
Back in Groucho's room, and Chico locks Groucho in the bathroom, who's calling, let me out. And Chico puts on some makeup in order to look like Groucho.
And he does.
Really does. They all kind of look alike.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, obviously, because they're brothers, but like, I think Chico comes the closest to looking like Groucho in the getup. So, yeah.
Well, and apparently they did play each other sometimes. Yeah. So there's one where Groucho had to go to the hospital, have his appendix taken out. So Zeppo did Groucho.
Oh, wow.
This is in 1930. And at first, nobody noticed. They would frequently put on each other's outfits. I don't know frequently, but they did do it.
Right.
And now Chico goes in as Firefly to talk to Mrs. Treesdale.
Oh, Your Excellency, I'm so glad you come.
I'm glad I come too. You got the plans?
And she's wondering why he has an Italian accent.
Oh, well, you see, maybe sometime I go to Italy and I'm practicing the language.
And then Harpo, also dressed as Groucho, shows up. And Chico is under the bed. And now Harpo's talking to her with the horn.
What's the matter with you? Have you lost your voice?
And then he disappears. And she thinks she's all alone. So she starts to undress. But then Groucho is there.
Right.
So now we've got the three Grouchos all in their nightgowns, all with their hats. Or night shirts, I guess. And now Harpo runs down the stairs, slides at the bottom, and he's got the combination for the safe to open up the safe and get the plans. And he goes to the safe and he starts putting in the combination, but it's not a safe, it's a radio, and it bursts out with John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever really loud. And we have a bit of trying to turn it off, trying to cover it, hitting with seltzer, throwing it, breaking it up with a, like something that looks like a mic stand or something, and finally throws it out the window. And I like that Margaret Dumont says,
"What's that?"
Sounds to me like mice.
Mice don't play music.
No? How about the old maestro?
You just gotta like words. If you don't like,
Yeah, it's not gonna work if you don't like words. Yeah.
Although it is funny, like, that you get both insane, like, silent movie level physical comedy,
right,
and Groucho level word comedy in the same film.
Again, not an easy thing to do, people.
Harpo runs into a mirror and shatters it.
And apparently sweeps all the mirror fragments away.
And now we get one of the great bits of all time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Apparently, this is Leo McCarey's idea.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he really did contribute a lot to this film, it sounds like.
It's very smart idea, man. Jesus.
And what it is it's Harpo and Groucho. And Groucho thinks he is looking at himself in a mirror, or believes that maybe he isn't, and keeps trying to trick his reflection. And they're so good.
Yeah.
Part of what makes them so good is that it's not perfect, if you know what I mean. It's almost perfect.
Right.
And then, there are a couple of bits. The greatest one for me is Groucho spins around and throws his hands out, and Harpo doesn't spin around and throws his hands out in the same way. Groucho doesn't see it because he was spinning around.
Right.
That's just like a perfect visual gag.
It's a clever, brilliant bit within the bit, right? Because he knows he's going to, what do I got to spin? I'll just stand here and go, ta-da! Yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, and then the moment where they actually circle each other walking through the mirror.
Twice. And he has the hat. And he has the right hat. Because you think the whole time he's going to get found out, and he pulls out the right hat.
Yeah, it is. Well, and this is just like, it is 3 minutes of total silliness.
Yeah.
Until finally Chico shows up, and now we have two reflections in the mirror, and we grab Chico.
Oh, God. When Chico comes in and he's like, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, no. What's going on? No, you idiot. And then he's the one that gets captured. It's so funny.
And now he is on trial.
He's a Secretary of War. He's a treason. Come on.
Yeah, it's a big deal. By the way, one of the guys is a guy with a big mustache who's sitting there.
Yeah.
He is the nephew of Sullivan from Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Groucho loved Gilbert and Sullivan, unsurprisingly.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were just really happy to have this guy on the set.
The lead attorney, the prosecuting attorney, is the guy who played Ming the Merciless back in the 30s and 40s. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Give me a number from 1 to 10.
11.
Right.
Now I ask you one. What is it? Has a trunk with no key, weighs 2,000 pounds, and lives in a circus?
That's irrelevant.
Irrelevant? Hey, that's the answer.
And again, it goes to this thing where everybody else is totally straight. They have to ignore everything that's happening around them.
I mean, when he says, "What you accuse of taking the battle plans?" I got 2 battle plans.
True, I sold a coat and 2 pair of planes.
Just funny, man.
Or Groucho saying, "Gentlemen,
Ciccolini here may talk like an idiot and look like an idiot, but don't let that fool you. He really is an idiot."
I'm going to tell you this right now. For about 20 years of my life, I would use that line when I would see someone say something stupid on television, whoever I was with, friends or girlfriends or family, I would say that all the time. Man, look like an idiot, talk like an idiot. Don't let them fool you. He really is an idiot.
And again, we're talking about trying to prevent war. Again, the ambassador comes to like resolve everything, right. And Firefly is ready. He's ready to resolve this. He's ready to give him his hand in friendship, and then he goes off.
And I feel sure that he will accept this gesture in the spirit in which it is offered. But suppose he doesn't? A fine thing that'll be. I hold out my hand and he refuses to accept it. That'll add a lot to my prestige, won't it? Me, the head of a country, snubbed by a foreign ambassador. Who does he think he is, that he can come here and make a sap out of me in front of all my people? Think of it. I hold out my hand, and that hyena refuses to accept it. Why, the cheap, ball-flushing swine, he'll never get away with it, I tell you. He'll never get away with it.
And the ambassador enters. So you refuse to shake hands with me, and he slaps him.
I love Lulu. It's like, I can't. That's the final straw. This means war.
And then we go into what multiple critics have described as what might be the craziest musical number in a Marx Brothers movie.
Oh, yeah.
This is the going to war. We're going to war.
At last the country's going to war. It is the country's going to war. At last the country's going to war. We're going to war. This is a fact we can't ignore. We're going to war.
It's nuts, particularly once Harpo enters with the baton. A chandelier collapses on him. I love the Marx Brothers playing the soldiers' helmets.
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
And Harpo cutting the feathers. They go into a Minnie the Moocher sort of reference with Heidi, Heidi, Heidi Ho.
Yeah.
Which, of course, this is probably peak Cab Calloway in the mid-30s.
Probably, yeah.
Heidi, 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 ho. Heidi, 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 ho.
They play fake banjos.
Yeah.
To the tune of Oh Susanna.
Yeah.
It's not that it's Busby Berkeley-ish, but it's definitely ridiculous musical number of the 30s, you know?
Yes. Yes. Once again, this is all about very funny physical surface comedy. All of it just works there, right? You don't need to go further. But if you're going further, what they're skewering is these calls to war, these pomp and let's get all that's we're going to war, and not thinking about the ramifications and the consequences of war, what it really leads to, the damage it does to so many people who go to war, the after effects of war, which, by the way, was not something people discovered right after Vietnam. That's been going on since the first war and every war afterwards. It's just that they had done a great job of hiding away those stories and not letting them be parts of the narrative around these wars. But that's what happens, because it's not something that doesn't leave a scar on you. So them making and them cutting, like Harpo cutting the feathers of the helmets off, that's just all like making fun of this idea of wanting to march off to war, make it a big deal and make it a song and make it a whole thing that you should be getting behind, when in fact it's really a terrible decision to make, and it's going to lead to a lot of damage on both sides, whether you win or lose. You know?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's true. It's like why there is this mix of pageantry and war.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally bizarre when you think about it.
Oh yeah.
Here you're going to do as serious a thing that you could ever do. And you know what we need is a marching band and a lot of flags and fireworks and all this stuff to celebrate, it seems like, heading off to have violence
to
and
kill
death
people.
and destruction.
Yeah. When I was in there, these were questions that of course you weren't allowed to ask.
Right.
But we would quietly make fun of it ourselves. The army or the military is not full of just like-minded people who think one group think the whole time. Right. There are a lot of us who understand the hypocrisy and the ridiculous pageantry of the whole setup of going to war, but it's all to make you feel like you're doing something that is worthwhile, that there's a purpose to what you're doing instead of the whims of a leader in charge who's upset about something, which sometimes it can be reduced to. Not every time. No, my denigrating World War II or the battles that were fought against real evil like Hitler. I'm just saying sometimes we're sent off to wars because leaders can't get over themselves and are pouty little whiny bitches, and we have to go pay for their fucking anger, and it's not right.
Like Rufus T. Firefly.
Exactly. Who's an idiot who is slapped the Sylvania. By the way, but the Sylvania leader is not, no good person either. He's trying to take over the country, but still the idiot made up in his mind some fantasy that the guy was going to be disrespectful to him and then reacted to that in real time. It's like waking up from a dream that your partner was in and getting mad at your partner because of something they did in the dream.
Right.
Like, what? I wasn't even, that's not real,
It really, honestly, it seems like the only responsible person in this movie is Margaret Dumont.
Yes. She actually cares about the country. Yeah.
Everyone else is just terrible.
Yeah.
At the climax of this musical number, we pull back a curtain revealing the Marx Brothers dressed up as like Washington in Revolutionary War outfits with Harpo on a horse.
Totally on a stage. What's the point of this? I have no idea.
Well, there's this weird evolution through the history of war and costumes that's about to go on. That's so.
That's a great point, Steve. Yes.
It's so odd. And right now we have Harpo ride off as a Paul Revere type.
Yeah.
And then he rides up to a house and sees a woman changing. Again, this is pre-Hays Code. They would never have gotten away with this next year.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Gets off the horse, goes upstairs. She's getting ready for a bath. And it's weird. It's actually really weird because you think it's going to go one way, but then actually she's then hiding him because her husband is about to show up.
Right.
And I don't know, like, are they implying that they had sex and then the husband shows up or what? I don't quite understand what they're implying.
This is a victim of bad editing. Like the guy that shows up to the leader of Sylvania. Apparently there was a whole subplot where he was trying to instigate a revolution, and all you get is that snippet of him being exhausted and that Rufus was smarter than he thought and blah, blah, blah. But we never saw any of those scenes. So I think this is a victim of editing as well, because her body position is one of being like, get away from me initially. I'm sure there's another scene that was cut where they're having this back and forth, and he eventually maybe gets close to seducing her, and then she,
Yeah. You know whose fault it probably is?
Whose?
My teacher, Eddie Dimitrick. He was the assistant editor. In addition to being a communist sympathizer.
Whoa.
He's one of the Hollywood 10. He went up in front of the House on Un-American Activities Committee.
Nice.
And he obviously messed up this cut. But now who comes home but her husband, which is the lemonade guy, of course. Yeah. And she hands him a gun and says the country's going off to war. And he goes, I want a bath. And we're in the tub, and he sits down in the tub, and we hear the horn. And you already know where this is going to go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Moves again, more horn, moves again, more horn. Then we hear a trumpet, and Harpo rises out of the tub in front of him with the trumpet, a la like Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street, And then he's again on his horse, sees a woman in a window, blows a kiss, rides his horse into the building, and then we get a great visual gag, which is we see his shoes, and the camera pans to her shoes, and the camera pans to horseshoes. And one of the things that let them get away with this, even before the Hays Code, you couldn't show a man and a woman in a bed together.
Right.
But it's okay that he's in the bed with the horse and she's in a separate bed. Now we're back with Groucho, and he's wearing maybe a Civil War uniform.
Yeah, it looks like Robert E. Lee uniform. Yeah, it looks like a Civil War uniform, totally.
And what we're going to see is he's in different uniforms each time.
Your Excellency, our men are being badly beaten in open warfare. I suggest we dig trenches.
Dig trenches? With our men being killed off like flies, there isn't time to dig trenches. We'll buy them ready-made. Here, run out and get some trenches.
Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. Get them this high, and our soldiers won't need any pants.
Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. Get them this high, and we won't need any soldiers.
Yes, sir.
There's just so many lines that I love.
Message from the front, sir.
Oh, I'm sick of messages from the front. Don't we ever get a message from the side?
General Smith reports a gas attack. He wants to know what to do.
Tell him to take a teaspoonful of bicarbonate soda and a half a glass of water.
Yes, sir.
Any answer to that message?
No, sir.
Well, in that case, don't send it.
And then a bomb goes through the window.
That's a cool effect, by the way, for that time.
Yeah.
That looked real, that bomb going right through. It doesn't look like there's strings or anything like that. It looks really well done, actually.
Groucho asks for where his Stradivarius is, opens up a violin case and pulls out a machine gun. Do you know what's the origin of the machine gun? It's got to be one of those gangster movies of this era, I assume.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
I don't know if it's Public Enemy #1 or because this is 33.
You mean carrying the machine gun in the violin case?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's got to be something like that.
Okay.
By the way, it's a different machine gun that he pulls out of the case from the one he shoots out the window.
Yeah.
That seems like a tough continuity thing to mess up, but they did.
Your Excellency, you're shooting your own men.
Here's $5. Keep it under your hat. Never mind, I'll keep it under my hat.
And we hear that we have a man pooling the countryside for volunteers. And we see Harpo with a sign and it says, "Join the Army, see the Navy."
and he's walking against what at the time was probably their version of a green screen there.
Right.
with all that footage going on behind him.
Yeah, just stock war footage, basically. And again, this goes to the thing you were saying before. We're out recruiting in the middle of this ridiculous war.
Yeah. The military is always recruiting. They use wars to recruit people. Because you got to replace the people that died. And if you win the war, that makes you recruit even more people who come back and speak so glowingly about the experience,
And now we see explosions on this house. And we cut back, and now Groucho is wearing a Scoutmaster's uniform with shorts, and Harpo has a tri-corner hat, which gets hit first once, and it spins a little, and then gets hit with a machine gun and spins continuously. Groucho is now dressed as like a beefeater from London with a giant fur hat. I don't know what the changes in uniform are, except that it's just ridiculously silly.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and maybe what it is, if we want to put meaning to it, is it's the ridiculous silliness of all history of war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like
all countries. Yeah.
Well, and because the way we tell war stories is these romantic, heroic things. And we're kind of exploding that.
Yep.
We're also exploding the house. Now the roof is falling in.
Calling all nations, calling all nations. We're in a mess, folks, we're in a mess. Rush to Fredonia. 3 men and 1 woman are trapped in the building. Send help at once. If you can't send help, send 2 more women.
And then Harpo holds up 3 fingers.
Make it 3 more women.
And then he says, "We must have help." And Harpo puts out a help wanted sign. Now Groucho's in a coonskin cap, a la, Daniel Boone.
Yeah.
Which one of us is going to have the rare privilege of sacrificing his life for his country?
And Chico does what is not an eeny, meeny, miny, mo, but something like it, and ends up with himself.
I did it wrong.
Does it again, ends up with himself.
It's no good, too.
And then just fakes it and points to Harpo.
It's so funny. I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it every time he lands on himself.
I think this next line is the best example of what you've been saying. As they're sending him out to die for his country, essentially, they say,
"You're a brave man. Go and break through the lines. And remember, while you're out there risking life and limb through shot and shell, we'll be in here thinking what a sucker you are."
Yeah, well, what does that make you think of, Steve?
Well, this is between World War I and World War II.
Yeah.
And this is very much like the rich people and powerful people who start wars get the other people to go out and fight them.
What did Donald Trump say allegedly in that interview or in that article in The Atlantic, right? That he called them suckers. Even at the fucking cemetery, he called them suckers and wondered what was the point. Do not fool yourself, ladies and gentlemen, that rich people see the world the way you do. They don't. They have no concept of it the way regular people do, or people who are not as super rich as them do, because they have always through time been able to buy their way out of situations. And this is yet another one of those instances where that's what Groucho, and that's what the movie is essentially saying in that moment. What a sucker you are, because we talked you into going to fight the war for us. And it's a useless cause. It's a cause that makes no sense.
Nothing. Yeah.
You're not going to get anything out of it. We're losing the war when we send you out there to go sacrifice your life. That's how useless we see you as, and it's unfortunate.
I probably won't paint all rich people with the same brush, but what I will say, where I totally agree, is that if you grow up in those circumstances, you got to work real hard to see things from other people's perspectives.
Right.
Because there's so much insulation around you. And there's a tendency when you're raised a certain way to believe that some reason you deserve it.
Yes.
You deserve it because you're special or better or something. Right. And you're not, you're lucky.
Lucky sperm club, as they call it.
Yeah. It shocked me when like a thing fell and hits Margaret Dumont.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, she's the one good person in this movie. And Harpo ends up, I don't quite understand why Harpo ends up in a room with all the ammunition, but of course it gets lit and now there's explosions going on around him and a chair falls on Groucho's head and it looked like it hurt to me. It does not look like it was on purpose. It looks like it was painful. And we hear help is on the way. And then we get this montage of fire trucks and motorcycles and rowers and racers and monkeys and elephants and dolphins. Dolphins are coming.
Don't forget the dolphins.
And Groucho gets shot in the butt. And then this big white urn thing drops on his head. Harpo finally gets out and wants to help him out of the urn thing. And then he turns around and the Groucho face is on the urn.
Yeah.
I think the movie is ridiculous from the very beginning,
but
they do a good job of it accelerating and amplifying.
It's a great sight gag.
Yeah. That Groucho face on the urn is like a real bit of insanity.
And it lasts for maybe 5 seconds. Then they put the firecracker in there and blow it up. So it was just really for that moment, which was really funny.
And right when after the thing is blown up, Groucho just says,
"Any mail for me while I was gone?"
And now they're breaking through the door and Harpo is hitting the soldiers as they come in through the door. And then Trentino comes in the door and they catch him.
Trentino, eh? That's game.
He surrenders and they start throwing stuff at him.
Groucho says, we're going to keep going until we run out of fruit. You're not getting out of it this easy.
And then Margaret Dumont bursts into Hail Fredonia.
Hail, hail, Fredonia!
And they turn and start throwing stuff at her. Fortunately, mostly missing her.
Yes, that was on purpose. They're supposed to miss her.
And that is the end of the film.
By the way, the Tommy gun in the violin case, 1930, Doorway to Hell, a James Cagney film. That's the first appearance of that, and from there it went forward. But yeah.
Thank you. That is an important piece of information. I'm glad that we got that right. Again, this is why you tune into the Cine-Files.
Yeah, exactly.
It was to some degree considered a failure, which it really wasn't. The thing was, the last movie they had was the biggest hit of the year.
Right.
It was the 6th highest grossing film of 1933.
Right.
That's really good.
Yeah.
It just isn't as big as their last one. It's not a flop. It got kind of mixed reviews and people thought that it didn't really compare to the other movies. They finally got out of this deal with Paramount. Chico made an insanely big money deal with Irving Thalberg at MGM.
Mm-hmm.
They continued to work together until the late 40s.
They continued making movies even when the public's taste for their comedy had moved on. And Thalberg was really the guy who understood them and made the changes to the movies, added love stories. I like Night at the Opera.
I like Night at the Opera.
Yeah. And so he's the one, but he died young, 28 years old, and he was their biggest supporter. And his death kind of affected their trajectory in Hollywood and where they would have gone. You know what I'm saying? But, Groucho found a second life hosting the shows and doing all that kind of stuff. So he was able to survive, and Harpo and Chico as well.
Yeah, and Harpo was part of the Algonquin Roundtable and was hanging out with intellectuals, By the way, whether or not this movie was intended to be political, Groucho said, we were just trying to do funny stuff. And someone asked, well, what's the significance of things? And he says, the significance is 4 Jews trying to get a laugh. But Mussolini was so offended by it, he banned the film in Italy, which, of course, the Marx Brothers loved.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the movie really had a resurgence in the 60s because all of the hippies saw this as political. They saw you're skewering authority, which is what they wanted to do. Zeppo left, he's done, and he and Gummo formed one of the most successful talent agencies in Hollywood.
Yeah, right?
They repped Lana Turner. They repped Jack Benny. Leo McCarey, he made Love Affair in the 50s, then remade his own movie as An Affair to Remember, and he did a long list of films, including Going My Way, Bells of St. Mary's. Obviously, as we said, this inspired everyone from Woody Allen to the Beatles to Animaniacs, some Sacha Baron Cohen, huge fan of the Marx Brothers in the way that it skewers authority. I will give my final thoughts of this film first. The first thing is, I love the fact that my 10-year-old could watch this movie that is 80 years old and was completely glued to it and still found it hilarious.
Yeah.
I think that the Marx Brothers are almost completely unique. Yes, there's people that have imitated, but the level of insanity, the level of complete surrealism and non sequiturs, the lack of reality is just beyond anything I can think of. And it is so fun. And to be able to sit there and have one of the great physical comedians of all time and one of the great word comedians of all time, and then have Chico who could bounce between them, I can't get enough of it.
Yeah. My final thoughts are this. I mean, when people tell you about classic comedies, this is what they're talking about. And try not to see it through 2021 eyes and go, oh, it's dated. Try to understand where it's coming from. Try to understand what they're skewing, what they're actually making fun of. And yes, Groucho's going to say that because that's what an intellectual would say. So it makes all the sense in the world. You don't want to draw attention to it. It's like telling the joke or explaining the joke. It loses its effect. There's so much physical humor here that is not overdone. There's so much great puns being done throughout the movie that are really funny. They're skewering every institution you can think of just about. And also providing just a basic level of very damn good comedy for you to enjoy overall. And it's a tight, hour and 8 minutes or hour and 9 minutes. And so it's a quick watch, but a lot happens within that quick watch that you can enjoy. And I think this is a film that still stands the test of time. I think their films still will affect, as you said, Sacha Baron Cohen still influenced by them. I'm influenced by the kind of comedy that I enjoy through what they did. So it's like it still carries over. And as Steve said, it's a film he can still show to his young son, and that will carry over. That will be an influence. So like anything else that is great, it is timeless. Anything in entertainment that is great, it is timeless. And because it is timeless, it deserves all our respect and recognition. And I'm glad we covered it for the Cine-Files. And if you haven't seen it, because a lot of you like to watch and listen to our episodes before you see the movie, I would encourage you to definitely watch this one as soon as possible. I think it's available on Tubi TV for free, Tubi TV for free. So go and enjoy it.
And this one is definitely one that you and I can't capture. You know what I mean?
No.
Like there's so much going on. Like one of the things I was thinking about is when watching it, you almost have to see it twice because everything happens so fast. You're just like, wait, what happened? What did they do? What?
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on. So that's what we think of Duck Soup and the Marx Brothers. We'd love to hear what you think. Visit us on our Facebook page. Let us know what your favorite Marx Brothers movie is. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cine_Files, on Instagram at the Cine-Files Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, where we could really use your reviews. They really help. Maybe make them surreal and maybe make them nonsensical and non sequiturs, but give them 5 stars. That's the most important thing. You can leave your comments on YouTube. You can also subscribe on Spotify or on Anchor. If you want to buy Duck Soup along with every other film we've ever done, you could do it on our website, Cine-Files.net. And if you want to support the show, you could do it on patreon.com/thecine-files, where you can pledge to pick one of our films or pick our Cine-Files shorts that we record every week. And if you want to reach me, you can do it on Twitter at SRMorris, Instagram at SRMorris1. And the farthest thing in the world from the Marx Brothers might be Star Trek, the original series. But if you're interested in that, you could check out Enterprise Incidents, my other podcast. John, how would people find you?
You can always find me at The Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you're a Twitch person, The Outlaw Nation, all one word there on Twitch. And head on over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Roca Says. See all the stuff we're doing there. And of course, the Top 10 and the Geek Buddies, all available for you to listen to in podcast form.
And I think that is it for this week. We will see you next time on the Cine-Files for another great film.